Aware that the meeting's being live streamed, and it will be publicly available on YouTube later on. Members, as always, please speak clearly into your microphones, and if you wouldn't mind turning your phones to silent, that would be great. Apologies. So we've got apology for lateness from Steve. Thank you very much. Tina, all those in favour, please say aye. And carried, thank you. Public forum, there is none booked this morning. Acceptance of late items, I don't believe there are any. Confidential business to be transferred into the open. We will have at some stage the directors, the appointment of the directors to BBL brought into the open later on. Change the order of business, I don't believe there is any, which brings us to the confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held on the 30th of June 2020. Are there any corrections to those minutes? In that case, can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Salisbury and Councillor Clout, thank you very much. Welcome, Councillor Morris. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Any updates that need to be recorded for that? Deputations, presentations, petitions. There are nil. Recommendations from other committees. I don't believe there are any. Which brings us to business of the day, colleagues. Serial 10 in your agenda, Annual Plan 2021 and the Adoption Report. If I can ask Paul to speak to that, please. Thank you, Paul.
Good morning. So the Adoption Report really reflects all of the decisions that have been made to date through the Annual Plan deliberations. I won't talk extensively on it because it's consistent with those resolutions. It underpins the following reports around the rates resolution and the borrowing program. Once adopted, the rates are pretty much ready to go in accordance with a normal timetable, and that we'll have collection with the deadline at the end of August, so consistent with prior years. So everything else is in line with. So I'll just take any questions.
Thanks very much, Paul. Councillors, any questions of Paul or the executive? Councillor, thank you, Councillor Baldock. Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Arbery, thank you very much. Councillor Baldock, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Look, it's been the longest annual plan I think I've ever been through, but I think our deliberation 2 days went very well, and we made some very good decisions. I think a lot of worthwhile projects were brought into it, requests from the community, and in general have ended up with a good rate resolution for the year. It is somewhat different from the third year of the LTP, which was at 8.1% and so on, but we will, and we've done our best to get that as low as we can, and I think it's a good way forward for this year to meet our obligations for the city.
Yeah, Councillor Arbery.
Yeah, very briefly, I think we've done the best we can to navigate between the rock and a hard place, between affordability and our financial constraints, so I think this is a good place that we've landed.
Anyone else? Councillor Robson.
Yeah, I think this is where the use of the word "we" by the mover and the seconder is appropriate. This is effectively an example of collective decision making. I think all of us, in talking to our friends and our families and those people that perhaps were brave enough to vote for us at the recent election, probably recognise that no one's got everything they wanted, although I have to say Councillor Heidi Hughes has done extraordinarily well as a first-time councillor. Swings and roundabouts, there's a long-term plan coming up. I think we do need to recognise where we sit in relation to some big issues, and I think we need to recognise where we sit in relation to our peers. There's a clock running, thank you. The reason that we're here is to serve our city, and I've made reference already to the exhortation in another part of the country by an organisation to be great ancestors. And I notice that one of the political parties at the moment is advocating looking ahead but acting now. And that's actually the role of governance. If you look at what governance is supposed to be about, it's supposed to be about setting the strategy for the future, scanning what's coming and making sure that we're prepared to take advantage of the opportunities that the future will present, but also prepared to deal with those things that perhaps can't be described as opportunities. And obviously we've recently been through this. There is a lot of work to do in this space. The thing that's given me most heart about this particular annual plan is that some sacred cows are now well and truly barbecued. The old growth pays for growth thing, this is the first certainly time I can remember that it's never been ever mentioned in any sense of having a belief or fact or evidence to support it. Also, we have now, I think, started to put to bed the myth that the residential ratepayer is holding the city back. I think it's fair to say that on a follow the money basis, those myths served a very small group within our community well, but served the rest of us quite poorly. One of the things I'm particularly pleased about is the creation of an ISAB. That, I think, sets the framework for looking forward. I think rather than using failed economic models to drive our strategy and everything else being an ad hoc addition or subtraction to that, we're now looking at being a far more balanced, forward-looking organisation. And I think that's really where we need to be, because that's how we will deliver what the city requires for the future. So in that regard, you know, it's welcoming to see that we're in line with some of these decisions, with some of the things that are happening in central government. I say some, but not all. The recent announcements around product stewardship, I think, bode well for this city as it moves into examining its waste situation more promptly. I would urge, however, those people that see the move into a ISAB, sustainability, a four well-beings, whatever you want to call it, approach, to remember that there are four. And for a lot of people who are seeing positive change, my concern is that they risk ignoring the economic well-being at their peril. There is balance to be sought here, real balance. So those people who are in the cultural, social, and environmental space have an obligation to recognise that there are four well-beings, not three. And while their excitement about our recognition that there are four is understandable, given our lack of recognition of these for so long, I think it's quite important to recognise, those people recognise that they don't want the pendulum to swing too far the other way. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. And in that sense, I feel that over the next 12 months as we run into our LTP, we really need to make sure we get that economic well-being setting well and truly grounded, because I think it is a fact, supported by evidence, that those people with poor economies fail on the other three well-beings. Thank you.
I commend you on the 5 minutes to its exact second. That was outstanding. Anyone else like to compete with that? Councillor Clout.
I could never compete with Councillor Robson in terms of time, so I'll keep it very short. Look, I think we've struck the balance well between the affordability concerns that people have rightly expressed, but also the need to keep investing for our city going forward. And so I think we've done well. And I think the spirit around the table, particularly during the deliberations, I thought was very positive. We all worked through the issues and the various projects that were brought to us, initiatives brought to us. I think we dealt with those issue by issue very cordially, and I think that bodes well for the future. Just one point I'd like to make is that I note that we are often making somewhat ad hoc decisions about particularly supporting various community groups. And so you'll see in paragraph 7 we supported quite a few funding applications, as it were, for individual groups, and they're all very worthwhile. What I would say though is there are a lot of other worthwhile community groups that either didn't ask for funding or were refused funding from us. So what I'd like to see in future is that we as governors, we set some parameters around how much we want to spend on the various well-beings, and that then we have what I might call a bulk contestable fund for those, and so that those worthy groups that come to us can then apply to a bulk fund, which we know in total what that's going to be, whether it's in the social space, in the environmental space, or even in the economic space. And then there will be a process whereby those funds are allocated and perhaps less politically motivated, and they can be done in a more independent fashion. So I'll just make that point. But I think overall we've done a really good, solid job here, and I want to congratulate, of course, the staff who worked long and hard, particularly on that second iteration of the annual plan. So thank you to everyone involved.
Councillor Clout, anyone else? Deputy Mayor Salisbury.
Yeah, firstly, I just want to thank the staff also, because the workload to prepare this year's AP has been massive. And the detail and the speed that you guys pulled it together was incredible, and the agility to adjust in the midst of COVID was just outstanding. So I'm very grateful for all that you have done to get us to this point. And I agree that given our situation, I think we have been able to strike a rate that both supports the ratepayers but also supports employment and continues to invest in our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kitty.
So, yes, I also love our community, and I think slightly different than some of my colleagues. I don't come from a place of right or wrong, or good or bad. I just think differently at times. So I also want positive, prudent progress for our city, but we are living in a different world after COVID. I believe we're in uncertain economic times. We are facing job losses, we are facing redundancy. We've been elected by our community to do the best that we can support them, our residents, our ratepayers and our businesses, who are the backbone of our economy. We need to engage with them at all times, and obviously that's what we've been doing, and I am really proud of what our community have come up with, of all our councillors and our staff who've put their heart and soul into this annual plan. We need to make sure that our procedures and our policies are in place, that we've got sustainable long-term futures for our cities, and again, for our residents and our businesses, which are the backbone of this community. I think at times, especially now, for the next year, this is time to slow our growth, to get back to the basics and focus on our wants and not our needs. I've been disappointed somewhat in some of the decisions that have been made here in regard to having cherry on the top stuff, which I believe could have waited another year at least, so that we could show empathy, so that we could show our sympathy towards our community that are hurting and are about to hurt in the future. I know that not everyone is suffering yet. I know that not everyone is being impacted by a rates rise or by some of these projects, but there are a lot of our community that have come to me that are. I want us to be able to support all social sectors. I think some of the spending that we've done could have gone back to our social sectors, could have gone back to our community groups, like Councillor Clout has said. There are groups that have missed out, and there is more that we could have done collectively for our community, I believe, in my opinion. I also believe there could have been some more safety aspects that could have been looked at, re our cycleways, and re other projects that maybe have been put on the back burner. We also need help from our regional partners, as outlined, and we need help from central government. We cannot achieve everything by ourselves. We are here as a council to provide for our community, our three waters, our roading, our infrastructure, obviously, and our rubbish needs. That has to be our basic needs that we need to focus on in the next year. I believe we've done a really good job here, but I do believe we could have done better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kitty. Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, as a first-term councillor, I spent the first part of last year trying to get a handle on this massive, complex organisation, and it's taken until now. And I think the process of the annual plan has finally kind of landed the scope of the organisation and put everything into perspective together. And it's been an incredible learning process for me. I just really want to thank the staff for the way that they have taken the time to put all the briefings in place, to do everything they can to inform us and bring us up to speed, because for them they do this every 3 years for new members. I'm really happy with what we've managed to achieve. I felt like we worked really well together. We looked at everything together and we made the best decisions that we could under an incredibly difficult year for everybody. And I'm proud to represent this team and really happy to be looking towards the long-term plan in the future. So,
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this? That being the case, I just want to, and I don't really want to reiterate everything that we said last time, but I do want to thank the staff and I'm talking about the wider staff, the exec and the wider staff, for all the effort that's gone onto this document. A number of councillors, I think, quite rightly pointed to the fact that this has been done at a very difficult time, not just COVID, but our financial position and a range of competing objectives. And I think Councillor Robson summed it up really well, and I do find myself listening to Councillor Kitty and reminding her that we also, as well as the infrastructure, water, roads and what have you, and houses, we are now, as of May 2019, as a council, like all councils, responsible for the four well-beings: cultural, social, environmental, and, as Councillor Robson pointed out, economic, which is also a very important part of those four well-beings, and for which we have to give considered thinking to, with the range of complicated issues that comes with Tauranga City's growth at this time. I've had, and look, I just wanted to thank my colleagues, my council colleagues, because it was tricky, and I think we did really well in the way that we behaved together. I think we debated the issues sensibly. I think there was a lot of passion, and yet I think we were very professional in how we conducted ourselves, and I commend you all for that. In fact, I've had a number of people, and I'm talking quite a number of people, message me on various forms saying, you know, really congratulations to the council, and there is a feeling that we are more united and as a city more connected than ever before. And I'm specifically talking now about relationships with central government, with our regional partners, with iwi, with NGOs, with community organisations, special interest groups, and I think this is starting to get out there, which I think is really good, given it's pretty obvious that we've had a settling in period, if I can call it that. So, you know, I just wanted to congratulate everybody on a job well done. I agree with Dawn that there are those that will feel let down by some of the decisions that we have made. And I wholly agree with Kelvin and having a more strategic look at the funding for special interest groups. I think there is a real opportunity to do that. And top of mind when he was talking about that were, for me, you know, Afina, because we went and celebrated their first birthday just the other day. And I'm using it just as an example because it's top of mind and it's very recent. But entities of that sort that give so much to the community and are really hand to mouth, I think we could do better on. And I think a more strategic style of funding would be a really good thing. So I just want to congratulate and thank everybody on the work that's been done. Oh yes, sorry, Andrew, did you want to speak? All right, thank you. Apologies. The problem with, of course, only having one person on Zoom, you forget, so I'll do better. All right, well, that being the case, and I'm assuming no one else does want to speak, Larry, did you want to have a closing reply on the circumstances? Well then, Council, I will put that to you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Abstentions? And carried unanimously. Thank you very much. I beg your pardon? Sorry. Against. Okay, I beg your pardon, so one opposed. No abstentions? Right, thank you. Just bear with me one moment, Council, please. Which leads us now to 10.2, Rates Resolution 2021. Again, Paul, if you could, and I think Jim's going to speak to this as well. Thank you, Paul.
Jim can take questions if needed, but the rates resolution really reflects what has just been adopted. It effectively reflects the rates struck through the funding impact statements that are included within the annual plan. So I'll take any questions, but it is consistent with what we've just adopted.
Thank you, Paul. I'm happy to move this from the chair. I beg your pardon. Steve?
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Paul and team. Probably a question for the wider team. I see Mr. Anderson sitting at the back there. I can feel the pressure coming from the public gallery. But I just note his submission around the Kupurirua Valley, and he's talking to Mana Whenua and the Rotary Centennial Trust. If he and his group are able to get to alignment with those three parties, is there any reason why we can't have a discussion later on about the future of the Kupurirua Valley, given that there may be no budgetary impact, rather than moving a resolution that we do that? I think I'm just asking a question.
And a very good question at that. Can I?
No issue. That can occur.
Thank you very much, and thanks for raising that, Councillor Morris. It's a great futuristic project, that's for sure. Fantastic. As I said, I'm happy to move this from the chair if I can get a second. Councillor Clout, thank you. Is there any discussion on this? Mr. Hughes.
No, thanks.
Sorry, no discussion. I'm not going. I've got nothing to say.
Sorry, I
about this.
thought we were still on K Valley.
All right. Well, in that case, I'll put this to you, Council. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Abstentions? And carried. Thank you very much. Leads us to 10.3, the borrowing program for 2020-2021. Mohan, Paul, did you want Mohan to?
Again, this report is consistent. Yeah. It's the borrowing program that reflects 10.1. So if there's any questions, Mohan is available as well.
Thank you. Councillors, thank you. Councillor Clark. Can I get a second? Deputy Mayor Salisbury, thank you very much. Councillor Clout, did you want to speak to this? Tina? Does anybody else, including Andrew, want to speak to this? And thank you. In that case, I'll put that to you, Council. All those in favour, 10.1. Please, I beg your pardon, 10.3 on your agenda. Please say aye. Against? And abstentions? Andrew, what was your response, sorry? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. 10.4, to adopt the final 2021 development contributions policy. Thank you, Christine.
So in a similar vein to the others, this puts in place development contributions policy to give effect to the funding of the capital projects included in the LTP, where they are being funded by way of DCs, and Anna Somerville's here if there's any specific questions on the policy.
Very much, Christine. Any questions, Council? Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Can I get a seconder for that? Deputy Mayor Salisbury, did you want to speak to that, Larry?
Look, development contributions are often controversial and talked about a lot in this chamber. Without them, we would have a rather large hole in taking care of infrastructure. We know that they never quite match the costs for reasons that are beyond our control. We have to do our best to estimate what costs will be. We find that things cost more. We know that we are in an environment where we're challenged by the community, by the development community, to make sure they are accurate as best they can be. So it's not like we can add extra in, and we did hope the government was going to allow for a bit of a contingency that would enable us to avoid that. And I hope at some point a future government may address that. But I will just comment a little bit on the growth pace for growth. That barbecue was held around about 2012. It's unfortunate Councillor Robson wasn't invited to partake of it, but we have known for more than a decade that the mantra, which was really the early 2000s about growth paying for growth, was not measuring up, and that ratepayers have had to come in and pay. But ultimately, when ratepayers do come in and top up, it is for intergenerational infrastructure which the community benefits from for many, many decades. And so it's not something we should continually be raising, really. It is simply the environment we work in. There are other models being looked at for the future. I'm not yet convinced myself that these things are going to deliver a cheaper way. And we are grateful, I think, for what COVID, one silver lining of COVID is the local government financing agreement, that we can have a greater debt to revenue ratio so that we can smooth things out better, and therefore some of the need to get things off balance sheet are not as pressing, in my opinion. But we all have to contribute. Of course, development contributions are passed on to homeowners and so on. It's all part of life, really. But these things have to go in the ground, and I think this city does a very, very good job in preparing for this, because we are one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing city in the country, yet the fourth smallest territorial authority. This will always be a challenge for us. We need, and I'm very pleased that the recent Urban Form and Transport Development Committee, we have gone ahead with the city plan change for intensification, although now we find that the RMA may change. And what the impact of that is going to be on our long-awaited desire to see intensification through Te Papa, I don't know. But anyway, that we're happy to support the development contributions policy for the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bullock. Councillor Robson.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I agree with Councillor Baldock that if we didn't have developer contributions, we'd have a very large hole. Of course, we probably wouldn't have development because the community wouldn't support it without the developers paying their share. But the truth, the facts are that there is still a hole. And the size of that hole we recalculate every 3 years. It's part of our sort of policy approach to looking at the size of the hole. And I think the last LTP, the hole was in the order of $40 million. And we know from recent decisions made in this chamber that the hole is going to be probably in the order of 50% larger than that when we start looking at this next year, a hole of $60 million. The barbecue that Councillor Baldock refers to that apparently started in 2012 was still going here in this chamber in 2018 when I made a comment upon my return to join the LTP process that the concerns that a submitter had around the cost of growth falling on ratepayers were real. The response from a councillor at the time was, ignore him, he doesn't know what he's talking about. That councillor then approached that person in the foyer outside and reassured that person in a one-to-one conversation that that councillor didn't know what he was talking about and growth would not fall on the ratepayer. That debate, as I say, was clearly alive and well 2 years ago. I know, I was there. The reality is that that subsidy gets collected effectively by the developer. Right? They don't reduce their prices to deal with it. What we do is we put the debt on future generations. It does become an intergenerational debt, but not for reasons of equity or justice or not in a way supported by the evidence. It's just that, and here I have some sympathy again with Councillor Baldock, the way the playing field is arranged, we lose. we lose. Central government have set legislation in such a way that the ratepayers have to pick up the minuses but can't keep the pluses. And that's unfortunate. And in the building of relationships with central government, it's really important that these areas are explored, and indeed they are being explored. One of the reasons that Tauranga City Council faces the challenges it does is because of our growth. Puts us at the bleeding edge in many ways of some of the issues that are created by central government. And we are hearing noises that central government are listening. I just hope they're hearing the voices of our community rather than the voices of a group that I think gets far too much time, a disproportionate share of time in the chamber, in key stakeholder meetings, in consideration, in consultation, in representation. You know, I am minded of Mr. Adams, Wealth of Nations writer, and the exhortation that he gave in that book, seen as a Bible by many capitalists, right-wingers, market fans, free market fans, and he made the point that when more than one business person gets together, no public good comes of it. And he exhorted regulators and governments and the people to regulate business and ensure that they were watched closely, that the flows of money were checked carefully, and that they were kept, if you like, in line by regulation and statute to ensure that the market served the people. All of them floated and raised all the boats, not some of them. I have made the comment before, and we don't want to be a city that is remembered as one man got a knighthood and everyone else got a nightmare. That's not where we want to be. There is work to be done in this space.
Point of order, Councillor Robson. Thank you very much. I don't think we need to be talking to Knights of the Realm in quite that way in the chambers. Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Salisbury, my apologies. I missed you in passing as the seconder.
That's okay. I think we've heard enough. I have nothing further to add.
Very much. Is there anyone else? Councillor Hollis, did you want to speak to this? Always enjoyable. Right, and that being the case, Councillor Bullock, did you want to...
Yes. I think I do have to just pick up on one or 2 points. I am very glad we live in a growing city. It is not a loss for the city to be a growing city. I wonder one day maybe Councillor Robson might move to a city that would make my day, but I hope he may live in a city for a while that isn't growing and just be able to compare the two. The financial challenges of a city not growing are far greater than a city like ours, which is growing. And I'm pleased that we can wrestle with the problems that come with that growth, knowing from a positive viewpoint that it is good for us. It's good for our citizens, it's good for opportunities economically, recreationally, environmentally, and so on to deal with issues. Thank you.
Very much. Councillors, I will put this to you then, please. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? And abstentions? Yeah, Andrew, can we just check with you again, please? What was your vote? No, thank you very much. No abstentions? Thank you. That is carried, which takes us on to 10.5, traffic and parking bylaws. Nick, thank you.
Thank you. I assume that we can take the paper as read. What it does is that it gives effect to the decision that was made to introduce free parking for the CBD with a limited or further limitations to the time limits. And this, if accepted, introduces the bylaw, which makes it then enforceable. So now it is, we have already introduced it, the free parking, but it isn't enforceable at this point in time. So this allows for that to happen.
Thank you very much, Nick. Deputy Mayor Salisbury,
Question.
and followed by Councillor Robson.
Yeah, question? Yep. Can I just clarify? So we decided on 2 hours free parking, but we didn't change the 3 hour limit that people can park on the street. Is that right? 2 of that's free, 1 of it will be paid. Is that what we did?
Beyond the 2 hours, you pay for parking.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's not free parking, it's 2 hours free parking, correct?
Yeah, that's right. 2 hours free parking.
Thank you. Councillor Robson.
Just to clarify that, in line with Councillor Salisbury's question, there is still the time limit, and it is now going to be 3, or is it going to be brought back to 2? Be any all day?
We're changing signage, so let me think about how to put this clearly. So 2 hours free parking, and after the 2 hours of free parking, you pay for 3 hours. Yeah, yeah. So Sam will help us out here with a with a story.
Thanks very much, Sam.
Kia ora team. Sorry to jump in. So on some of the car parks, they have 3 hour time limits which you can't pay for at the moment. So the resolution that was passed, basically the way to make that workable was to change the 3 hours to 2 hours, because there's no way to pay for it at the moment. So I guess these changes move some of the ones in the CBD that are currently P180s to P120s. And then the wording in the resolution also was that paid car parking was moved to a maximum of 120. So I guess we've followed that resolution that council passed, and so the maximum amount of time that you can park in a paid car park in the CBD is 120.
Is that on-street parking or off-street?
Yeah, on-street.
On-street. Yeah.
And then off-street parking remains the same in most places. Yeah. And so I guess the communications around that we've put out is that if you're coming into the CBD for more than 2 hours, we suggest going into off-street parking. Yes. Yep.
So
Right,
just to
thanks, Sam.
clarify, sorry, through the chair. Right. Just to clarify then, so if somebody comes in and parks their car, they don't need to do anything with the ticketing service at all, as long as they move in 2 hours.
Yes, that they have to move within 2 hours. They can't stay longer than 2 hours.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Yep, because that was what councillors passed in the resolution.
Very good. Thank you, Sam. I think Councillor Robson had, then Councillor Granger, then Councillor Baldock. Thank you.
It's a question, but more one of process at the moment. Will Councillor Hollis be actually moving this motion? Can we check? If not, I'll be happy to move it, but I just wanted to check, given Councillor Hollis led the fight on this successfully, I might add. Just wanted to clarify with that, just a process issue.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Robson. If it's okay with the chair, I would like to move it.
Thank you. I'm happy to second
Sure,
when the
thank
time
you.
comes.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hollis. I'll come back to you just in 2 seconds. Councillor Robson, followed by Councillor Baldock. Councillor Granger, I beg your pardon.
Thank you. I noted just a little bit of confusion here as regards to what is happening. The point I want to make, and I hope it is very, very, very clear, has to be noted to the public, to our community out there, that they can understand it. Because if they don't, frustration will set in. Can you understand where I'm coming from? has to be very, very clear to them. I understand that's what we're intending to do.
Was that a question? Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the reason for making it uniform, is that's a lot easier to understand than, I suppose, to digress a little bit, the idea of having 2 hours free and then being able to pay for longer than that meant that even to get free parking you would need to go and get a ticket that said that you had free parking, and I know that happens in Auckland, but it was quite a confusing situation. So I think that a blanket rule that's a bit easier to understand, I think.
Absolutely, and attached to that too, as we note, that your 15, your 30 and your 60 minutes still apply.
Yes.
Just as long as that's still noted to the public out there. I just want to make it very, very simple, easy understanding for them.
Yeah, and that's our intention as well, because I mean that's more work for us if it's difficult to understand as well. So.
Thanks very much, Councillor Granger, and for your
just
answer.
to add to that, that was also our original plan with the communication, and I think there was a bit of confusion around reported in media the following day after this resolution was passed without a timeline on it, and we recognised then that it would be confusing for the public with that statement not knowing from what time, and it would be easy to assume that it was from that day. So as it becomes enforceable, we have a different comms approach to it.
Thanks very much for that, Nick. Before I go to Councillor Hollis as the mover, Councillor Baldock, did you want to ask a question? No? Was there someone else that I've missed? No. Okay. Councillor Hollis, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just echoing Councillor Granger's comments, it must be simple. I go back to the 3-hour maximum limit that we used to have, which prevented me prior to joining council from even coming to town, because often my meetings would last me from 9 o'clock through to sometime around 3 o'clock. So I would choose other cafes, not the CBD, to meet, as I couldn't park all day. And by the way, didn't mind paying for it. Now that we're getting a little bit more parity with Greerton, the lakes, Mount Maunganui and Papamoa and Bayfair, it's certainly more reasonable for people to come back into the CBD and use cafes for meetings, for example, or do a little bit of shopping from whatever stores remain. And I think that it's a good start, but I would like to see it go further sometime in the future.
Very good. Thank you very much. Councillor Robson is seconder. Would you like to speak to this?
Reserve, thank you, Your Worship.
Anyone else? Councillor Morris.
Thank you, and just acknowledgement to Leanne Brown, who's one of the 9 people watching right now live in the ether. I do want to thank Councillor Hollis for bringing this forward. There's been, during the last 7 years I've been here, a tremendous amount of hand-wringing on CBD parking, and whatever the proposal, whether it be 3 hours free, free after 3, time limits, no time limits, the prevailing view of many retailers out there was that whatever council was not doing was the solution. And I think the trial, I think we need to be realistic here. It is a trial till November, but the key thing is it must be advertised widely so that our community knows it. In the past, we have not done that. We forwent revenue for our city with the free after 3 for a number of years, but it was not widely known amongst our community because we did not communicate with our community, and that was an opportunity lost for our CBD retailers. I've got an idea for a marketing campaign, probably featuring Councillor Hollis in his white van. I think that would be a great little program for downtown Tauranga to make a video. I think it'd be quite entertaining as a nationally notarised person that he is. So the big thing is we've got to communicate widely. Please, 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 just communicate widely on this. Our retailers will thank us for it. Our community will thank us for it. And at the end of the trial, we'll know whether it's worked or not. We must communicate.
Councillor Morris. Anyone else? I just want to reiterate really what Councillor Morris said, and you would have seen from the traffic recently that I have asked Main Street through Tuscany to do to try and measure this, because I think it is really important we do measure it. Anecdotally, it does appear that it's made an immediate difference, that's for sure, and that's a great thing. But I do think, I hope that it's measured accurately, so we do have the data that we need to make a decision on its future after the temporary status ends. And like Councillor Morris, I've always been confused, I have to say, about why Tauranga is treated differently to Greaton and Mount Maunganui. And I think that lack of consistency is problematic across the entire city. It is one city, and yet there are different rules for different parts of the city, which just creates a silo. So I'm very pleased that this has happened, and I hope it can be sustainable. Councillor Baldock, followed by Councillor Robson. Mr. Robson.
We know why that is. Okay, so look, we make statements like, you know, we want to make it simple and clear, but I've been around a long time and there's been a lot of efforts to make it simple and clear, and it never is. And trials make it even worse, because by the time people get used to a trial in November and we then change it, if we are hearing from the community and they want something different, it just gets more confusing. The opening comments from the mover lead me to, unless I've misunderstood what he was saying, lead me to think he doesn't understand what he's moving, because he said that he used to come to town before he was a councillor and he wanted to be here for 6 hours but he could only stay for 3. None of that is changing, in fact. So there'll only be 2. The idea always has been if people come to town for longer, they would park in car park buildings, which is where we wanted them to park. The reason there's a difference between the CBD and the other areas, Greaton and Mount, is that we have car park buildings, and those buildings cost money to build, maintain, and therefore we subsidise those, in a sense, from on-street parking, but we also use it as a strategy, parking strategy. To get people to go into a building, there has to be a benefit of that. One of them is time and the other is price. And when we go to free on-street parking, and I've already seen it in the comments that are being made, beginning to say, we need more parking. Well, how are we going to provide that? We're tearing down one car park building. We're going to just rebuild it as a car park building, going against the government policy statements about multimodal shift and so on, and trying to incentivise people to ride buses into here. It is just one of the most complicated things council ever deals with, and I agree with Councillor Morris nearly always. Whatever we're doing, the CBD proprietors seem to want the other thing. And when we've listened to them and done what they wanted us to do, which was 3-hour time limits recently, like within the last 2 years maybe, it seemed to be working because it was getting rid of the people who were parking there all day and who were working in the CBD. Not necessarily the retailers' workers, but the business community. And so I have not voted for this before, and I will not vote for it again today. I believe we're messing with something that has no simple solution, really. It's part of the tension of a CBD. And we'll see this trial, I'm sure. We'll find that there's inadequate parking. There are cries for us to provide more. We can't create street parking. We can only create off-street parking. We would like this private sector to step into that, but while we're offering free stuff on the street, it's going to be very hard for anybody to make a business case of building a car park building anywhere in the CBD. So my position doesn't change on this. I don't normally hold on, and through all the annual plan I compromised when I lost arguments and debated hard, but this is one I feel strongly about. We're just messing around with something.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Councillor Kitty, followed by Councillor Hughes. I beg your pardon, Councillor Robson, you've reserved, so I take it you do want to wait from the...
Thank you.
So I just want to say for the free trial, I think it is just a trial. We are talking about trials in other areas and saying it's a great idea. So I do also believe that this is a fantastic idea. We've heard from our businesses, we've heard from the owners, we've heard that this is what they're wanting. This is obviously my first time round. I can't speak on prior knowledge. So I'm really pleased that this can go ahead. I'm pleased that we're trying to adopt something that our retailers actually want out there to encourage people to come into the CBD, something that we're trying to revitalise and revisit all the time. This will show us some data. We are getting news from retailers already, and so far it's been positive. I agree that we need to be advertising. There needs to be a lot of advertising out there so that our community knows exactly what the 2 free hours is and how long it goes for, as well as the education. Now, the education needs to go not only back to our community, but back to our businesses and those retailers to encourage them to make sure that their employees aren't parking in the 2 free hours. The 2 free hours is designed for our community to come into town and explore the shops that are left down in our CBD and to encourage spending locally. This is a trial. I am pleased that we are listening. I am pleased that we are hearing, and I am pleased we are doing something that our business community want.
Very much, Dawn. Councillor Hughes, thank you.
I didn't support this in the annual plans, but I will be supporting it today, in view that from what I've heard around the table since then, and from what I've heard from the community, these are extraordinary times, and we do have a CBD which is really hurting right now. After COVID-19, things have changed for a lot of people, and the CBD needs any support that we can give it right now. So until November, to signal to them that if this is what they think will make the difference, then I think that we should be listening, and we have. I also, though, acknowledge too that we can't offer great solutions right now in our public transport and in our cycling. We've got a long way to go. So we need to do both in tandem here. And I really hope that in the long-term plan we are going to be fully committed to getting really safe cycleways to offer other solutions for people coming to the city, and also better public transport solutions for people to have better choices into the future. But until then, we can't just sort of let this city languish, and I'll be in support of this. One more comment is that for people who are parking all day in the car parking buildings, etc., I'd be super in support of starting to raise the prices there, so that we can support our buildings and make it competitive for for car parking businesses to want to come in and build their own car parks instead of us running them into the future. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Heidi. Councillor Robson.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Baldock, and it's complex, and the big difference between the CBD and other areas stares you in the face. Other areas are basically single story. And when you have a situation where every building has 3 or 4 car parks on street, 2, 3, 4 car parks on street out in front of it, life is relatively simple. But the truth is our CBD, while not a CBD like Wellington or Auckland or Christchurch or Dunedin or even Hamilton, does have 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th floors. So you have more people per metre of street space, and ultimately, therefore, you have a higher parking demand per metre of street space, and you need to accommodate that somehow. That is the reason that CBDs need to manage things differently from those vast suburban shopping centres. My observations with regard to how we've approached this is generally we have been data free. We've been high on ideology and idiocy on occasions, and low on data. I have enormous sympathy for Tuscany Agency in their requests to get metrics and measurements working in this space. We need to do this. If this trial is not accompanied by an appropriate, effective data collection system, we are wasting our time, and we will repeat all the ideological debates, in 5-6 months. And we'll embarrass ourselves because we'll have been those debates in the run-up to probably the peak retail season for retailers, Christmas. And to take the trial away in November would be, shame on all of us. So my exhortation is that we give this trial a chance, and we give ourselves a chance of not embarrassing ourselves, as I think Councillor Baldock has effectively alluded to repeatedly, by collecting data so we can have an informed discussion in November. And on the basis that this organisation is committed to collecting data, and we will have an informed conversation, I will be happy to second, as I have, and vote for this motion.
John? Andrew, did you want right of reply as the mover?
I just think that Councillor Baldock probably has a great deal of learning to do. I'm not sure where his dislike of workers comes from, but I don't see this happening in Papamoa or Greerton or any of the other shopping complexes. So I'm not sure why he feels that our streets will be filled with the evils of retail workers on $18.50 an hour parking on the streets and then rolling their cars forward every 2 hours, as they seem to be in his world. I want to talk about the original trial was for 3 hours. We compromised it down to 2, which I hope would then go to paid parking, which is what I've heard this morning. So it's not a limit of 2 hours, it's a limit of 4. And we can be clearer about that if we want later. The parking buildings, one point that was made was that we cannot create new on-street parking, and that's absolutely fallacious. We have removed 500 on-street car parks from between 4th Ave and the other side of the police station over the last 10 years, and we could create 500 car parks by removing the yellow dots on the roads, on the avenues, and allowing those to be utilised again. That's some way of creating 500 on-street car parks overnight if we wished to. And parking buildings themselves ought to be paid for by themselves. We charge a lot of commercial rates and leases, and if those things aren't paying for the buildings, then why should we expect the ratepayers of the city to double dip after they've already paid for the infrastructure for the road that they're parking on? I think that's an interesting conversation. And the only other point that I would like to make eludes me. So I think I'll leave it at that point. And thank you for this.
Thank you. I think that's called a senior moment, Andrew. It's normally what I have. You're way too young. I will, before I put this to the vote, I'm just going to ask Sam to clarify one thing you said, which is the 4 hours.
Yeah, so it's not 2 hours and then 2 hours, it's just 2 hours free maximum, and then you need to move your car preferably into a long-term parking space. Yep.
Thanks for that clarification, Sam. Councillors, I will then put this to you. Winding back, just so we know what we're talking about here, it is in fact 10.5. Thank you very much, Robin. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Against, Councillor Baldock. Any abstentions? And carried. Thank you very much. Councillor Robson, you're poised with your finger over the button. Is there something you'd like to say, or? Oh, okay. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please, to move into public excluded? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Salisbury and Councillor Cloud. All those in favour, please say aye. And carried. Thank you very much. Which brings us to number 12.